Hi, my name is Paul Sargent. Welcome once again to AP Euro Bit by Bit, the series in which I'm trying to go through modern European history piece by piece so that you can better understand it. Today, we're going to continue in our study of the Enlightenment, and we're going to look at one of the most influential and one of the most popular writers of the Enlightened period. His name's Voltaire. So let's get going. Now, it's important to look at Voltaire's early life before he becomes sort of the big figure of the Enlightenment. He was not born Voltaire, but he was born François-Marie Arouet. And in his young life, he added the du Voltaire onto his name to make his name sound more aristocratic, to give himself some sort of sense of nobility. And, let's face it, the guy was very popular with the nobility because he was a playwright and he was a poet, and he had an incredible way with words. He had such biting sarcasm and wit that people loved him. He became a celebrity. So he started hanging around with the upper class, and with the du Voltaire, it made things a little bit easier. But it also caused him some problems. So the problems it caused really kind of changed Voltaire, and it changed him into the Voltaire that became so influential. Because what happened one night, he was attending a party with a bunch of his aristocratic friends, and one of the aristocrats made the comment to him that it must be nice to be able to give oneself a title of nobility, to which Voltaire, with his biting wit, replied, well, it must be nice to ruin your own family's title of nobility through your own actions. In other words, like, yeah, you're a noble, but that doesn't mean you're not human. Well, in response, this aristocrat had some of his men go and beat up Voltaire, beat him up pretty badly. And so Voltaire complained to his aristocratic friends, and in France at the time, their response was pretty much, well, what do you expect? You're a commoner. You're from the middle class, third estate, you get the idea. You're a commoner, and you insulted an aristocrat. He has the right to do this. He was thrown in prison for a while in the Bastille, and he eventually was exiled from France, especially from Paris, where he would never return until right before his death. Well, his exile took him to England, and in England there were two main things that happened that changed his view of the entire world. Number one, he was present at the funeral of Isaac Newton. Now, Isaac Newton is buried, he's still there. I mean, you know, I think. I haven't looked under the stone. Maybe he's gone. Good movie idea. Anyway, so Isaac Newton, who is a common man with no noble birth, was buried in Westminster Abbey, which is the place where kings and queens of England are crowned and married and buried, and the tombs of kings and queens are all there, along with Isaac Newton and some other notable contributors to English culture. Well, Voltaire makes the observation that in France, who he criticizes his entire life, in France, that Isaac Newton would have been buried in a commoner's grave in unconsecrated ground. Big difference. Now, the second thing that changed Voltaire's outlook on life was religion in England. And at this point, yeah, England had some real problems between the Puritans and the Catholics and the Puritans and the Anglicans and all of this, and there was a civil war, you guys remember that. But at this time, religious toleration had really become the rule. Jews, Quakers, Puritans, Presbyterians, Catholics, Anglicans, I mean, they were all there and they were all practicing freely. And he noticed this and wrote a very, very scathing view of religion, but a very optimistic view of English religion. In one point, he wrote this: if there were just one religion in England, despotism would threaten. If there were two religions, they would cut each other's throats. But there are 30 religions, and they live together peacefully and happily. So in other words, religious intolerance was a horrible thing. And guess what? France had religious intolerance. So another criticism of France. So religion became a big thing for Voltaire, and throughout his life he wrote against it incessantly. And it wasn't that he didn't believe in God. In fact, he really is kind of credited with being the first Deist. He believed in that Newtonian God that had created the perfect universe and set it in place and didn't intervene in the lives of people. He saw no reason for prayer, for a religious hierarchy, for religion, for church, for any of that. In fact, he thought church had corrupted the ideals of God and Christianity itself, and is credited with saying, "Crush the infamous thing." In other words, religious intolerance. Get rid of it because it's toxic to a society. And so he goes throughout his life criticizing religion, especially the religion that's there in France. Are you seeing a theme here? Now, the other thing that he fought for was this idea of enlightened absolutism. He didn't really believe that people could rule themselves. He wasn't pushing for democracy or anything like that, but he did believe that there were certain natural rights that people had, following on the ideas of Locke and the future ideas of Rousseau. I can't follow on those. Following on the ideals of Locke, he believed that there were natural rights and that there should be limits on the power of the king. However, he did believe that people needed a strong central ruler who could sort of run the country. Otherwise, a nation would fall apart. But that ruler needed to give in to certain things: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, needed to promote education and the sciences, things like that. And most importantly, not use the church and religion to try and placate or even control the masses. Now, while he's extremely influential and while he's probably the best known Enlightenment philosopher, there is a problem with Voltaire. And that's that he never offered any solutions. He was great at criticizing, and his seminal work, Candide, is a complete and utter criticism of every single facet of 18th century society. But there's no solutions. There's absolutely nothing. And so, while he points out a lot of criticisms, he leaves it to other philosophers, other philosophes, other writers to pull together the actual solutions. The other problem with Voltaire is that while he sort of criticized and hated the old regime, throughout his life he always wanted to be part of it. And so he spent most of his life with the aristocrats, with women who were supporting him. He lived at the different royal courts for a while and spent his life in complete and utter luxury, giving him the freedom to write and write and write and write. And when historians look back, they've got a lot to work with because he had a lot to write. So what do you need to know about Voltaire? Well, remember this. He was against religious intolerance. He was against bigotry. He was against the church. But he was a critic of everything that he saw. So that's the big idea. Voltaire, there's your time here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. So check back again soon for my next video. And otherwise, go back and look at some of the others. So subscribe and let me know if there are topics which you'd like me to cover. Till then, my name is Paul Sargent. This is AP Euro Bit by Bit. Have a wonderful day.